we're starting. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, Mr. Lee. I had not intended on reading today. I'm being encouraged strongly by my wife to do that. So with that in mind, and the fact that Mr. Lee had even been so kind as to say he thought something was inappropriate on the Facebook group that I kind of agreed with. So I thought I would, Mr. Lee constantly asks questions that I don't necessarily answer all the time, and I want to broach that and clarify that, and then read Go shows based on what I'm trying to convey here. Mr. Lee is obviously a Mahayanist Buddhist. He has a lot of questions, though, that pertain to constantly questioning the credential of the Daishonin as it relates to his teaching. And what about this and what about that? Now, the last video, he went in there, he says, "Hi, Tom, for understanding." And I understand that's why you always ask all these questions, Mr. Lee, all right? For understanding, I'd like to hear from you a full detailed talk about Nichiren explaining why Zen Buddhism is misleading in your next video. And so, Mr. Lee, I really don't do it on a basis of people just making requests and then I decide to start talking about whatever they've requested. I really chant Daimoku and the Gohonzon guides me towards what comes out of my mouth, because it isn't coming from me, it's coming from a different source than me, that's for sure. So at any rate, understand that it's not as simple as a Q&A between you and me. I've read all this stuff, you have not. So even if I answered your question, you'd just be taking my word for it unless I go into the process of reading it from the Gosho itself. And when you, as a Mahayanist, checking out these various teachings as it relates to Mahayana Buddhism and why is Nichiren Buddhism actually the supreme Mahayana Buddhism, you have every right to ask that question. But do understand that the reason I don't get back to you quite often is because what you're asking is of no relevance really to a lot of the people that watch this channel, because they're not just Mahayana Buddhists, they're Nichiren Buddhists. They're trying to understand the teaching of Nichiren. That's what I'm really here to convey. And I've already conveyed the teaching of Nichiren on Zen, but it's not enough, evidently, because I think that for you to say, give a full, deep 200 pages explanation of Zen Buddhism, I think you underestimate how much Nichiren has already talked about this in the Gosho. And it's much more, it's probably at least 200 pages, bro. He's, there's 2 volumes of Gosho that have been published, and there's still a little bit more Gosho than this that has not been translated yet, okay? That's a lot of doctrine, okay? But you're gonna go crack open the books and read all that? I mean, you can. I would encourage you to, if you have these kinds of questions. I'm going to read you a couple of Gosho. I'm going to get into some things that I hadn't planned on getting involved with today. But I don't want you to think that I don't appreciate your continuous watching of what we're doing here and your attention. And you always ask legitimate questions. It's just that I then have to make the decision, how much time do I want to spend on just answering Mr. Lee's question? Because I don't think that I don't try to put myself in a position of being available to other people that practice other forms of Buddhism. I did that for the first 8 years that I started this teaching process that it's been going on now for 18 years, back in 2004. So I've read all of these Goshos. I've put them all on the internet ad infinitum before I started doing a video kind of a thing. And again, that was a study meeting. That was a private study meeting that suddenly got videoed without me even knowing it was going to. But what you have to understand is there's a distinction. Why is almost everything I read out of Volume 1? Because Volume 1 is about faith and overcoming problems. It's about daily life stuff. It's about people practicing the Daishonin's Buddhism as practitioners with him as their encouragement to do so. Practicing something that had never existed before as a teaching prior to his advent and him making it clear. So a lot of people that practice and chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo have those similar kinds of situations going on in their lives versus a doctrinal person that's like an academic or maybe somebody from a different school qualifying like, where does it say that? Where does it say that? Well, it's real easy to find out where does it say that if you know where it says that. So before I go further, I want to give you a hint, Mr. Lee, on where to find all of your answers about these various things as it relates to Zen or True Word or precepts or Nimbutsu. Okay, those are all very major schools of Buddhism. But like I said to you, as far as Zen is concerned, to me personally, from everything I've read and everything I know, Zen is complete bullshit. Now, how could you say that? Well, I say that because that's my personal opinion. After studying and contemplating this and praying about it, Zen isn't even from Shakyamuni, for God's sake, unless you want to start twisting a couple of sentences around, as that Daishonin qualifies, is the big mistake. Bodhidharma is the one that made up all that stuff. It really doesn't come from a direction that Shakyamuni pointed anybody specifically in. Their whole thing is it's a mind-to-mind transmission. That means it's not even based on the sutras. That means it's not even based on the teachings of Shakyamuni. Okay? So how can I say this? Because I've read all the goshos where the Daishonin qualifies what sutras the Zen people practice and what the beliefs and the teaching of the Zen actually is. Not some Zen guy from now and today. I mean, I've met some people that practice Zen. I was never very impressed by them. As it relates to an actual perspective of life, they seem to get off on being pretty arrogant about being able to say a bunch of shit that they couldn't prove and that there was no proof being offered other than they're saying it. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that Soka Gakkai has already gone through this process with innumerable people all over the world, all kinds of different philosophies, all kinds of different outlooks. And one of the things that makes, the Soka Gakkai, and Daisaku Ikeda is he took on this mission that got passed on to him from President Toda to make this a worldwide circumstance. Now, if you're just teaching in Japan, you don't have to deal with the mindset or the perspective of others outside of your home territory, okay? So President Ikeda has had to merge all of this teaching from Nichiren that's in writing, but it's also referring to doctrine that exists outside of the Daishonin's teachings, okay? So that's why we have people like Burton Watson, who did the translation of the Lotus Sutra and the translation of the OTT. And I'm going to read to you, was majorly involved in the translation of these Gosho. These are all academics. These are all people that don't have an axe to grind because they're a particular priest or something, a teacher, or somebody that has an allegiance to a particular school of thought. Okay? They strictly translate what they read, okay? And of course, all translations are constantly in a process of evolution because the process of communicating by virtue of language is constantly evolving and changing. So I don't speak in Old English, although Old English is the root base of the language that I do speak. You could go from wherever you are. The people that were talking 400 years ago in your home area were speaking a different dialect of what they're saying. You're an offshoot and a growth of all of that. So this is a process that's always going to take place. And so again, to show you how easy it is to know everything about Buddhism, because Nichiren Daishonin knew everything about Buddhism. And you don't have to take my word for it. If you'll go read what I've read, I think you'll be convinced of exactly the same thing. Something like arbitrarily saying is he got 200 pages. He's got much more than that. Okay, but I'm not going to read it all to you. You got to go read it. It's all available on www.nichirenlibrary.org. And this is www.nichirenlibrary.org. The Soka Gakkai, after having spent all the money that they have, and they've spent a fortune on getting this right, making sure that their doctrine is not assailable, that there's no issues as it relates to a conflict of reality or something that's fluffed up and BS'd. If you go to the dictionary, it qualifies anything that really can't be qualified as something that really can't be qualified. The dictionary is written by academic scholars of Buddhism. Okay, so you can go to the Soka Gakkai dictionary and find just about anything about Buddhism, and it'll give you a straight up, objective, unattached to attitude or prejudice definition of what it is. But interestingly, again, and the Soka Gakkai has spent millions of dollars doing all of this. Believe me, from all of the study department, the offshoot from the 50s. How did they convert and become the dominant sect in Japan? They defeated all the other sects in debate. How could they do that if they couldn't back up what they were saying? They knew that, and so on the front end, they put in the time, the money, the effort to master the other teachings so that they could be refuted. Okay, don't forget, we do everything, a lot of stuff on the basis of refutation. We do Gongyo on the basis of refutation and borrowing from the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so understand that. This is all validated with coin. That's how this work and this body of understanding has occurred. It hasn't been by a bunch of volunteers that want to, help spread Nichiren Buddhism. That isn't the way it was approached. It was approached like, if I get in a debate with you, I'm going to kick your ass because I know what you've not gone to the trouble to know. Okay? About your own school, about your own teaching. And a lot of what I think you think is not necessarily what the original thought was for some of the schools you've mentioned in the past. So if I go to www.nichirenlibrary.org, I get this front page. Right here is a little, magnifying glass. So I put in Zen. I hit the little magnifying glass, and I get from volume 1 of this 211 references to Zen. I get, and that's not just every time it was mentioned in a Go show. That's had to be a different issue as it relates to Zen. Volume 2. There's 238, so there's even more in here because volume 2 is more devoted to doctrinal debate than it is to how to advance in your daily life chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I mean, they're still the same situation, but this is a refutation volume, whereas the other one's already based on faith, and that's why it was published first. Interestingly, though, when I get to the Lotus Sutra, there are absolutely zero references to Zen in the Lotus Sutra. Okay, when I get to the orally transmitted teachings, it reduces to 8, and then there's 151 references in the dictionary. So there's a whole lot to read and understand about Zen if you really want to know about Zen. Zen, as far as the Daishonin is concerned, is a slanderous teaching. It's the teaching of the heavenly devil. I've already mentioned that to you. He's the one that qualified it as that. That's why I consider it that. If you wanted to read a great Go show that I knew off the top of my head to direct you to, on page 99 of volume 1 is Conversation Between a Sage and an Unenlightened Man. Now that's a great thesis. It's got a part 1, part 2. It's about 35 pages long. All of part 2 is pretty much devoted to a refutation of Zen for specific reasons that pertain to the doctrine of the Lotus Sutra. Don't forget, when we talk about Zen, we talking about Lotus Sutra teaching? No, we're not. Okay, and so what did Tentai think of Zen? He didn't do Tentai didn't do Zen. Nanye didn't do Zen. Nagarjuna didn't do Zen. That's all Bodhidharma stuff. Okay, Myolo didn't do Zen. Dengyo didn't do Zen. I mean, I don't know who you think is all great and powerful and puffed up that's done Zen that has something to show for it. I know a bunch of friends like from the suburbs back in the States, but beyond that, no, not really anybody. So with that stated, again, because the thing about Zen is it's not a teaching from the sutras. Okay, that's going to be the main point of refutation on Zen by the Daishonin. But out of fairness to you, I am going to read a couple of Goshos. Now, if you want to get all into the doctrine of the other schools, and Zen versus True Word versus Precepts versus Nimbutsu versus Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, just start reading volume 2 at the very beginning, which is what I'm going to start you out on today by reading the first 2 Goshos out of volume 2. But before that, since I'm starting at the beginning of volume 2, I'm going to read the preface, which is going to qualify where this writing comes from, where this translation comes from that I'm relying on as my point of refutation. And then I'm going to read the translator's note before I start reading the actual Gosho. Okay? Because even in something like this, read the beginning, read the preface, read the foreword, read whatever you have to before you get to the beginning of the teaching. And then you'll understand more correctly what's being put in front of you and being presented. All right, so starting with page 13 of volume 2, the preface. It says, the Soka Gakkai a few years ago published the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, which they're talking about volume 1, containing English translations of 172 works by Nichiren from Nichiren. The Soka Gakkai a few years ago published the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, containing English translations of 172 works by Nichiren Daishonin, from the Soka Gakkai publication Nichiren Daishonin Gosho Zenshu, the complete works of Nichiren Daishonin. The present work represents volume 2 of the earlier publication and contains English translations of 234 works, bringing the total number of translations to 406 between both volumes of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Together, the 2 volumes contain all of the Daishonin's 10 major works, which is another thing. There's like at least 4 or 5 of them that are in this volume 2. But again, they're mostly refutation of the other schools' kinds of major works. They're very technical. Together, the 2 volumes contain all of the Daishonin's 10 major works as designated by his immediate successor, Nikko. 6 of these are entitled On Establishing the Correct Teaching for the Peace of the Land, The Opening of the Eyes, The Object of Devotion for Absorbing the Mind, Selection of Time, On Repaying Debts of Gratitude, and On the 4 Stages of Faith and the 5 Stages of Practice were included in the earlier volume, volume 1. The present volume contains the remaining 4 on reciting the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, choosing the heart of the Lotus Sutra, letters to Shimoyama, and questions and answers on the object of devotion. Though written in the context of 13th century Japan, the Daishonin's work shed universally valid light upon the sanctity of life and its boundless potentiality, while rejecting anyone or anything that undervalues or imposes harm upon life. They stressed the view that all human beings are potential Buddhas. The Daishonin directs severe criticism at various Buddhist schools that, in his view, pursue some external authority that extends to control people or make them submissive. One of those out of the 4 dictums I mentioned is Zen. All right, so the Daishonin affirms the equality of all people, women, and men alike. For example, he writes, these 10 worlds are born from the mind of the individual and constitute the 84,000 teachings. Here, a single individual has been used as an example, but the same thing applies equally to all living beings. He also states there should be no discrimination among those who propagate the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo in the latter day of the law, be they men or women. Were they not bodhisattvas of the earth, they could not chant the Daimoku. A spirit of all-embracing, and so any school that rejects the equality of men and women, boom, out the window from the get-go. A spirit of all-embracing compassion characterizes the life of the Buddha. In his work entitled On Reprimanding Hachiman, the Daishonin states, the Nirvana Sutra says, the very sufferings that all living beings undergo, all these are the thus come one's own sufferings. And Nichiren declares that the sufferings that all living beings undergo, all springing from this one cause, all of these are Nichiren's own sufferings. In the record of the orally transmitted teachings, after citing the same passage from the Nirvana Sutra, the Daishonin is quoting as saying, Nichiren declares that the varied sufferings of all living beings that all living beings undergo, all these are Nichiren's own sufferings, from the record of the orally transmitted teachings on page 138. As explained in the preface to Volume 1, again, in the preface to Volume 1, in terms of content, the Daishonin's works may be classified into 4 categories. Treatises on doctrines, 2, written writings remonstrating with government and religious authorities, 3, letters offering advice, encouragement, and consolation to believers or those answering questions, and 4, writings conveying the Daishonin's oral teachings. Many of his writings belong to categories 1 and 3. Okay, and the present volume contains 11 letters of remonstration that may be classified under category 2. And category 2 is, none of the writings of category 4 are included in this volume, which means none of the orally transmitted teachings are in this volume. This volume also contains several writings that are in chart or diagram form, and Mr. Lee, you'll get a lot out of that if you go into the first 5 or so Goshos in Volume 2. You'll see a lot of stuff that'll clarify a lot of stuff. When you ask or wonder, did Nichiren really have all of these other schools' teachings mastered? Yeah, that's where he diagrams who was the founder of the school, what sutras they're based on, what their belief set is, what the difference between the schools are when they split into different teachings from different teachers. All that stuff is all in Volume 2. He says, this volume also contains several writings that are in chart or diagram form, such as the diagram of the 5 periods of the Buddha's lifetime teachings, and the rooster diagram of the 5 periods of the Buddha's lifetime teachings. The charts and diagrams employ outline form to provide a quick understanding of these teachings, and it worked for me. I think you'll get the same. Prior to the publication of the present writing, the Soka Gakkai in 2004 published the English translation by Burton Watson of the Angi Kuden, the record of the orally transmitted teachings, under the title The Record of the Orally Transmitted Teachings. The Angi Kuden was not written by Nichiren himself, but was completed by Nikko Nikko on the basis of notes on the Daishonin's lectures on the Lotus Sutra. The translation has therefore not been included in this present volume. This does not imply, however, that this is not of great importance in making clear the Daishonin's ideas. The complete works of Nichiren Daishonin contains 4 other records of a similar nature that have yet to be translated into English. For readers who have not yet read Volume 1, we recommend that they read the foreword by Daisaku Ikeda, which is again what I'm telling you to do, president of the Soka Gakkai International, and the preface, introduction, and translator notes that appear at the beginning of that volume, as I have asked you to do as well. The appendixes at the back of this volume will provide knowledge that is helpful in understanding the writings. The glossary explains the meanings of Buddhist terms and concepts found in this volume. In closing, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to Dr. Burton Watson, the translator of the Lotus Sutra and the orally transmitted teachings and other works of Chinese literature, for his continued contribution to the translations in this volume. So Burton Watson, master academics, the top of the top in relation to translations of the works of Shakyamuni from Sanskrit, okay, from Kumarajiva's translations, Chinese translations. He's got it all down. He was involved, Burton Watson, even though his name isn't on here, by Burton Watson, he was part of the translation of all of this stuff. So it's not done by yo-ho Nichiren fans. Okay, because Mr. Watson, frankly, was not a member of the Soka Gakkai. He worked closely with them. He respected Daisaku Ikeda. I call him the Kumarajiva of the 21st century because he is. But again, this is not translated with prejudice toward Nichiren's teachings. Translators note on page 15, Roman numeral 15 of volume 2. The writings of Nichiren Daishonin, a 2-volume work, is completed with the publication of the present volume. While the consistency and style should ideally be maintained throughout, we found it necessary or advisable to make some changes in style and in the translation of quotations from the sutras and commentaries that appeared in volume 1. We would like, therefore, to explain the major differences in style between the 2 volumes. So if you don't read all the stuff in the front of it, you're not going to understand that there is a change, that they evolved a little bit in what they decided to qualify and how. Like this uses diacritical marks in volume 2, so you can understand how to pronounce things without going to the appendix in the back. First and foremost, in the second volume, macrons have been added to mark long vowels in Japanese and Sanskrit words, though other diacritical marks are omitted in the earlier volume. So as I have more trouble remembering how to say Indian names in volume 1, I have less of a problem here because there will be something that says this is Nege Arjuna, not Nagarjuna, right? So again, first and foremost, in the second volume, macrons have been added to mark long vowels in Japanese and Sanskrit words, though other diacritical marks are omitted as in the earlier volume. Macrons are not used, however, on a few words basic to Nichiren Daishonin's teaching, such as Myoho Rengekyo, or on the well-known place names such as Tokyo. Second, in the background section, the year of writings is simply indicated by Gregorian calendar dates without reference to the Japanese era names used by the Daishonin. The era names usually appear at the end of the main text close to the background section. Thus, for example, a date such as the 3rd day of the 2nd month of the 9th year of Bunei 1272 is shown in the background section as the 3rd day of the 2nd month of 1272. The day and month indicates dates according to the lunar calendar. Third, the translation of quotations from the sutras and commentaries were revised wherever such revision was considered necessary. For example, the statement by Myolo in volume 1 that reads, "The stronger one's faith, the greater the protection of the Buddha's gods," has been revised to read, "If one's mind is strong, the protection of the gods is also sure to be firm." Faith and mind are both translations of the Japanese word kokoro, or as explained in the translator's note in volume 1, the word kokoro, which is customarily translated as heart or mind, has no exact English equivalent. Thus, the words "one's mind is strong" means to be strong in faith, willpower, and caution. Fourth, while this volume primarily comprises translations of works as they appear in Nichiren Daishonin Gosho Zenshu, the complete works of Nichiren Daishonin from the Nichiren Shoshu, several departures from the original text should be noted. A fragment of a letter that does not appear in the Gosho Zenshu will be found in this volume under the title of "On Meeting with the late lay priest Samyo-ji." This fragment, which exists in the Daishonin's own hand, refers to his meeting with Hojo Tokiyori, the retired regent and most powerful figure in the Kamakura shogunate, to whom the Daishonin has submitted his treatise on establish the correct teaching for the peace of the land. A letter addressed to Naja Tokumitsu turned out to be a combination of 2 fragments unrelated to one another. Thus, they have been separated and appear here entitled "The 100th Day Observance" on page 919 and "Not a One Will Fail to Attain Buddhahood" on page 1081. Also, several letters in this volume contain lines that do not appear in the Gosho Zenshu. The sources of these lines are extant fragments in the Daishonin's own handwriting, which the Soka Gakkai study department determined fit in those letters. So this is, again, not a redo of Nichiren Shoshu. Okay, this is where they found little fragments, where they found things that should be corrected from the Gosho Zinshu. They made those corrections. They're not locked into Nichiren Shoshu or the high priest of Nichiren Shoshu's perspective, or the study department of Nichiren Shoshu. That's why, once again, I'm going to say this. If you read this book, it's 40 years old. It's more than 40 years old, and its original title is The Buddhism of Nichiren Shoshu. It's got all kinds of doctrinal reference that we don't use anymore. That's why it's not a valid source for learning about Buddhism anymore in 2021 going on 2022. And no disrespect to the author. This is merely a matter of the timing that's always going on. It's no difference than, did you think the Soka Gakkai study department decided we're going to go change stuff from the Gosho Zinshu for the sake of just doing it? No, it's because as time went on, things became clear. And so they did so for the sake of clarity and correctness. All right. In the continent of Jampadvipa has the inserted passage that reads, though people speak of the divine eye, the wisdom eye, or the Dharma eye, the Buddha eye, on the clothing and food. This is just telling all the little sentences, single sentences that were retranslated from previous reflective translations that have preceded this volume, but that were not included in this, because a lot of these Goshos originally were translated into English for us English language Soka members back under the NSIC period when Nichiren Shoshu governed everything that was allowed to be put in print. I won't finish the rest of that paragraph qualifying all those exceptions. Fifth, in sequential numbers assigned to the various writings of this volume, in this volume begin with where the numbers in the first volume left off. That is, in other words, the last one with page was number 173. Gosho page numbers in the present volume, however, begin with the number 1. Quotations from any writing in this or the previous volume in the background section or notes are cited as follows. We have avoided repeating that this is explained in the translator's note in volume 1. This includes explanations of a number of words used in those translations of the Daishonin's teachings that differ from the generally understood sense, such as deity, God, demon, evil, sin, and punishment. Again, all of these words have no connection to what you would think of if you had started from a Christian background and begun to read these translations, because all those words would make you think of God or Christian deities, or evil like the devil, or sin as in, doing wrong kinds of behavioral things. That's a precept. We don't do precepts. We do one precept, the precept of the diamond chalice. Other matters explained in the note are the cyclical signs of persons, age, the titles of documents, personal names, the usage of CE and BCE dates based on the lunar calendar, and so forth. We recommend, therefore, that readers familiarize themselves with the translator's notes in Volume 1. So many of you I know have read Volume 1. You've never read the translator's notes. I just know that for a fact without even asking you. So there you go. The people that wrote these 2 volumes are saying, please be aware of these circumstances. So today's Gosho, where are we at on time?
33 minutes.
Great. All right, we're going to start by reading Gosho page number 173 from Volume 2 of Writings of Nichiren Daishonin. It's a letter to Renjo. I'll go to the background on page 8. Mr. Lee, this is all about Zen. Both of these Goshos are about Zen or Zen and the other 3 of the 4 dictums. Background. Nichiren Daishonin wrote this letter to Renjo, in 1255, some 2 years after he had first publicly set forth his teaching. In this teaching, the Daishonin asserted that the Lotus Sutra represents the core of the lifetime teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. At the same time, he clarified that the essence of the Lotus Sutra is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the teaching that best accords with the capacities of people of the latter day of the law, and that enables them to attain Buddhahood. In doctrine, the Daishonin refuted the doctrines of the well-known religious schools of his day, such as Nimbutsu or Pure Land Zen, True Word, and Precepts, which used sutras other than the Lotus as their basis. In this letter, he addresses the Zen school exclusively, criticizing its core assertions. He determines that Zen, which describes its doctrines as separate transmission outside the sutras, Zen qualifies itself as that, and independent of words or writing, is actually a teaching outside Buddhism. It's not even Buddhism, which has been passed down through words and writings in the form of sutras. At the time, Zen had spread broadly among the samurai class, and key individuals within the Kamakura shogunate literally sponsored the construction of Zen temples, inviting ranking Zen priests from Kyoto and China to preside over them. This letter is addressed to Renjo, about whom little is known. So going back to page 3 of volume 2, and I'll start, letter to Renjo. The Zen school states that when the world honored one, could you give me a little more of that? Thanks. The Zen school states that when the world honored one was about to enter nirvana, he took his seat, twirled a flower, and showed it to the assembly. Meheike Shayapa's face broke into a smile. The Buddha said, I have a subtle teaching concerning the eye and treasury of the correct teaching, the wonderful mind of nirvana, the true aspect that is without characteristics. It represents a separate transmission outside the sutras, independent of words or writing. I entrust it to Meheike Shayapa. Question. This is all going to be question and answer. So the Zen school states, he puts that down as a preamble. Now he's going to start asking questions and giving answers as it relates to the actual doctrine of Zen. Question, in what sutra does this passage occur that was just quoted by the Zen school? And he answers, the Zen school replies, the passage is from the Sutra of the Buddha answering the great heavenly the great heavenly King Brahma's questions. Question, what Tripitaka master translated this sutra into Chinese? It is not listed in the Chao Yin era catalog or the Kai Yun era catalog of the sacred writings. Why is this? The Zen school replies, this sutra is a secret sutra. Therefore, its words alone were transmitted from India to China. So that means right away it's also an esoteric teaching. And the Daishonin says there's no, thumbs down on secret teachings, man. You're not gonna create Kosen Rufu with secret teachings. So Zen says this is a secret teaching. Question, in the age of, and he's just gonna bust the hell out of him here. Question, in the age of what sage or what Buddhist teacher was it transmitted to China? The Daishonin is asking. Why is there no record of this transmission? This sutra is not listed in the early records of the sacred scriptures, but only appears in the records of later times. If this sutra constitutes the source of the Zen school's teaching, it ought to be listed in the earliest records from the scriptures. From this, it is obvious that this is a spurious text. The Zen school says, the second volume of the Nirvana Sutra states, now I take this unsurpassed correct teaching that I possess and I entrust it to Meheike Shayapa. How do you interpret this passage? Answer. Although the word unsurpassed would appear to refer to the Mahayana teachings, here it indicates the Hinayana teachings. In comparison to the erroneous doctrines of the non-Buddhists, the Hinayana teachings are called the correct teaching. For example, the great teacher Myolo, and I've already gone through this, he segments into the five types of flower garland, agamas, correct and equal, wisdom, and the perfect teaching. For example, the great teacher Myolo in his commentary, when explaining the phrase, the great teaching moved gradually eastward, states the word great teaching referred to the Buddhist teachings in general. That is, the Mahayana, Hinayana, provisional, and true teachings are all included in the term great teaching. When the Hinayana teachings are compared to the non-Buddhist teachings, they are called the Mahayana, or great teaching. It is though a person of lowly status were, in accordance with the circumstance, addressed as master, or spoken of as a person of exalted status. Volume 3 of the Nirvana Sutra states, if the treasure of the law were entrusted to Ananda and the other monk disciples, it would not be able to endure for long. Why? Because all the voice hearers and men such as Maheke Shayapa are subject to the process of change. They are like that old man who is entrusted with another person's possession but is unable to fulfill his duty. Hence, the unsurpassed Buddhist teaching should be entrusted to the Bodhisattvas. The Bodhisattvas are skilled at questions and answers, and for that reason, the treasure of the law will be able to endure for long. Over countless thousands of ages, it will thrive and grow ever more brilliant, bringing benefit and peace to living beings. They are like the person who, being in the prime of his life, is fit to be entrusted with another person's possessions. That is the reason it is bestowed upon the great Bodhisattvas, simply because they are skilled at questioning. From this, it is clear that the Mahayana teachings and the Hinayana teachings were entrusted to different persons. Volume 10 of the same sutra states, now Manjushri, all of you must broadly expound the great teaching for the sake of the 4 kinds of believers. Now I entrust this sutra teaching to you, Manjushri, and if you, Maheke Shayapa, Ananda, and others come, then in the same way I will entrust the correct teaching to them. In other words, when you guys get to be bodhisattvas, from this we know that Manjushri and Maheke Shayapa were entrusted with a great teaching. But the teaching the Buddha entrusted to the latter was the Hinayana teaching. The treatise on enlightenment to one's nature says, a person who understands the mind can gain the way of enlightenment. Therefore, such a person is called a Buddha. I'll say it again. A person who understands the mind can gain the way of enlightenment. Therefore, such a person is called a Buddha. But there are 5 kinds of enlightenment. What kind of enlightenment is meant here? And there are various ways of gaining the way. What kind of way is referred to here? What is made clear in the sutras, other than the Lotus Sutra, is not the great enlightenment or the unsurpassed way. The Buddha says, in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth in the Lotus Sutra, or actually in the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra preceding the Lotus Sutra, part of the threefold Lotus Sutra. Question, in the Lotus Sutra, eminent and humble persons, men and women, what sort of way of enlightenment do they gain? Question, in the Lotus Sutra, eminent and humble persons, men and women, what sort of way of enlightenment do they gain? Answer, the Lotus Sutra says, as soon as they have heard one verse, they will all without doubt be certain of attaining enlightenment. And again it says, honestly discarding expedient means, I will preach only the unsurpassed way. From this we know that what is gained is unsurpassed enlightenment. The sutra further states, if one listens to them, the preachers of the law, for even a moment, one will immediately attain supreme perfect enlightenment. This enlightenment then is a benefit gained and then revealed by one who listens to this Lotus Sutra teaching for even a moment. You connect with the sutra, that's hearing the name and the words of the truth. Questions, you speak of a moment. It is said that 30 moments make up one day and one night. When you say one listens to them for even a moment, is this the kind of moment you mean? Answer, yes. Volume 2 of Tentai's Great Concentration and Insight says, do not neglect it even for a moment. And the annotations on Great Concentration and Insight states, that would be Myolo, it is not permissible to neglect it even for a short time. Therefore, the text speaks of a moment. Hence, we know that a moment means a very brief space of time. Question, the field of the original nature is what we in the Zen school take as the model on which to base our Zen meditation. What is your opinion on this? Answer. What do you mean by the field of the original nature? In what sutra does this term appear? The Lotus Sutra is the true field of the blessings for human and heavenly beings, which means that it is the great teaching used to instruct and convert human and heavenly beings. Hence, the Buddha is called the teacher of heavenly and human beings. Persons who put faith in this sutra are able not only to see the Buddha innate in their own being, which is the whole point as we've discussed, but to see all the Buddhas of the three existences of past, present, and future. It is though one were looking into the pure crystal mirror of King Yama, in which all forms of shapes are seen. Thus the sutra says, and it will be like a pure bright mirror in which forms and shapes are all reflected. The Zen school teaches that the mind itself is the Buddha and that the body is none other than the Buddha. What is your opinion on this? Answer. The sutra states the mind is the utmost enemy, and this enemy works the greatest evil. This enemy can bind persons and send them to the place of King Yama. When you are burning alone in the fires of hell because of retribution for your evil deeds, you cannot hope to save the wife and children you cherished, your brothers or your kin. And the Nirvana Sutra says, may I be the master of my mind and not let my mind become my master. Deluded and shameless as the mind is, to declare that the mind itself is the Buddha is to be a person who supposes he has attained what he has not attained, who supposes that he has understood what he has not understood. Is it not? Question. What is the view of the Lotus School? Answer. The Lotus Sutra states, if you are endowed with the 32 features, then this will be true extinction. And it says that living beings quickly acquire the body of a Buddha. But the Zen school, revering the Buddha, which is the essential nature of phenomena, supposes that the self and Shakyamuni Buddha are equal, which is to fall into the error of overbearing arrogance. Surely a person who does so will be condemned to the Avicii hell. Hence the Lotus Sutra says, the monks who are overbearingly arrogant will fall into a great pit, like all those Zen masters that I've met who thought that their shit did not stink. The Zen school says, go trampling on Vairocana's head. But who is this Vairocana? Do they mean the Dharma body that exists everywhere throughout the entire realm of phenomena? If so, then the mountains and rivers, the great earth itself, are all the body ground of Vairocana. This is the Vairocana as the essential nature of phenomena. This body ground is trampled on by dogs and foxes and such like. It is surely not the property of the Zen school alone. Or do they mean actually trampling on the head of the Buddha Shakyamuni? But even the god Brahma cannot see the top of the Buddha's head. So how could it be possible for ordinary mortals of an inferior level to trample on it? In this relation to all living beings, the Buddha manifests the three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent. To trample on the head of a loving father whose kindness and virtue are so vast as to behave as an extremely stupid and wicked person, one perversely sinful and void of filial respect. Even the sacred texts of Confucius condemn such behavior, to say nothing of the correct teaching of the thus come one. Could there be anyone so foolish as to praise such wrong behavior, such an erroneous teaching, and blame and thereby incur immeasurable weighty blame? When the Buddha was in the world, we are told that Maheke Shyapa bowed his head in respectful obeisance. But now that he has passed into nirvana, these benighted Zen believers say they will trample on the Buddha's head? What fearful words! The Zen school says it is a separate transmission outside of the sutras, independent of words or writing. What is your opinion on this? Answer. Generally speaking, there are three types of teaching that are propagated in the world. First is the Confucian teaching, which is of 27 varieties. Second is the Taoist teaching, which comprises 25 schools. Third are the 12 divisions of the Buddhist scriptures, or what Tentai school defines as the 4 teachings and the 8 teachings. Does the Zen school claim that it is something outside these teachings? It is customary among physicians to name anyone who departs from the basic practices of medicine a practitioner of outside ways. In human society, one speaks of those relatives who are of a surname other than one's own as outside relatives. And in Buddhism, that which departs from the sutras and treatises is known as an outside way. Zen is an outside way. The Nirvana Sutra states that there is any person who does not abide by the expositions of the Buddha, you should understand that this person is a servant of the devil. And volume 9 of On Great Concentration and Insight says, before the Lotus Sutra, they were disciples of an outside, non-Buddhist way. The Zen school describes itself as something not transmitted by the Buddha and patriarchs. What is your opinion on this? Answer: if that is so, then why does the Zen school talk about the 28 patriarchs of India and the 6 patriarchs of China? If you speak in this way, you are refuting your own assertion that the teachings were entrusted to Maheke Shayapa, are you not? How do you explain this contradiction in your own words? The Zen school says this superior way of ours has not been transmitted by the sages of the past. Answer: if that is so, then the Zen school of today can have no real understanding of this superior way either. And if it has no real understanding of it, then it is not true Zen. All the Zen school does is sing about a superior way, resting in arrogance, never correcting its deluded views, but instead boasting of perceiving one's true nature. Its greatest mistake is to create gaps between people's capacity and the Buddhist teaching. In doing so, it impedes the enlightening process of the Buddhist teaching and falls ever deeper into error. The Zen followers talk about a doctrine outside the sutra and practice this thing outside the sutras, and they say their doctrine is independent of words or writing, yet they love to take up their brushes and write about it. Their words and their hearts fail to match. How could they be other than followers of the heavenly devil, disciples of a non-Buddhist way? It is though the use of words and letters that the Buddha saves living. It is through the use of words and letters that the Buddha saves living beings. Question: what proof have you of this? Volume 15 of the Nirvana Sutra states, my wish is that all living beings will accept and uphold the words and letters of the Buddhist teaching. And the Sutra on resolving doubts about the middle day of the law says, it is through the use of words and letters that living beings are saved and can attain enlightenment. If one rejects the use of words and letters, then how can the Buddha's work be done? Does the Zen school claim that it uses no words in teaching people? If that is what it claims, then how does it account for the fact that Bodhidharma from southern India wrote a commentary in 5 volumes on the 4-volume Lankavetera Sutra? When he transmitted it to his disciple Huiko, he said, observing the land of China, I see that this sutra alone is suitable for saving people. Therefore, you must use this for saving the world. If this account is true, then how can you persist in your unreasonable assertion that yours is a separate transmission outside the sutras? So he refutes it on that basis, Mr. Lee. Next, with regard to the claim that Zen is something not transmitted by the Buddhas and patriarchs, did not Bodhidharma say hot or cold? Just experience them for yourself? Is this not an injunction in his words? And after this injunction has been passed from teacher to disciple, the latter can then understand hot and cold for himself. This is what the Lotus Sutra means when it says, thrust aside evil friends and associate with good companions. Great Concentration and Insight states, Tentai, if one does not meet up with a teacher, one's perverse wisdom will grow day by day. One's immersion into the sufferings of birth and death will become deeper within each month. Like a person dragging a curved log through a dense forest, one can never hope to when can one ever hope to escape? Even when encountering the problems of everyday life, One must consult with others. And how much more is this true when attempting to understand the profound principles of Buddhism? How can one hope to grasp them easily by oneself? As the Nirvana Sutra says, close, but you cannot see it like your eyelashes. Far off, but you cannot see it like the trail of a bird's flight in the sky. Leaving aside the seated Zen meditation of persons of superior faculties and superior capacity, the Zen school follows a set present time, sit facing the wall as though they had an earthenware jar over their heads. As the Lotus Sutra says, their vision is so impaired that they can see nothing. They do not seek the Buddha, but with his great might or the law that can end their suffering, but enter deeply into erroneous views, hoping to shed suffering through greater suffering. On great concentration and insight states, they do not even comprehend the clear words of everyday life, much less the profound principles of the middle way. How can they possibly comprehend the mystic teachings which are perfect and eternally abiding? So you can see, Tentai was refuting, everybody was refuting. The Zen school believers of the present age are all holders of greatly erroneous views. In particular, they rely on the recorded sayings of common mortals who have not yet freed themselves from the three categories of illusion and scorn the words and teachings of the thus come one, the possessor of the four kinds of wisdom, perfect in understanding. Could there be any greater folly? For the sickness they have no medicine to offer. To fit the capacities of the living beings they have no teaching. Even bodhisattvas at the stage of near perfect enlightenment still relied upon the Buddha's teachings. Why do these ignorant people who are on the lowest level of practice not put their faith in the sutras? Thus it happened that when the Zen school rose to prominence in China, that country rapidly fell into decline. And now, as an omen of the impending downfall of our own nation, we see these Zen teachers with their benighted understanding everywhere about us. Great concentration and insight says, this is an ominous specter of the destruction of the law. This is an ominous specter of the age. The Zen school says the Lotus Sutra seems to refute our claim to a teaching independent of words or writing. But then, why does the Buddha say, I have never preached a single word? Answer, I assume you are quoting from the passage in the Lankavatara Sutra, but apparently you do not understand the two terms, the original and abiding law and the law that the Buddha realized for himself. If you are not familiar with these two principles, you should study them. Moreover, the sutra you refer to has already been invalidated by the words of the Buddha. In these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth. Why use a sutra such as that for your standard? Question. The sutra on resolving doubts about the middle day of the law states, I have never seen the thus come one preach one phrase of the law. How do you account for this? Answer. These are the words of Bodhisattva constant donations. The Lotus Sutra states, when the Bodhisattva is hearing this law, the Lotus Sutra states, when the Bodhisattvas hear this law, they will be released from all entanglements of doubt. The 1,200 arhats, they too will attain Buddhahood. Thus we know that the 80,000 bodhisattvas and 1,200 arhats all sat in the assembly and listened to the law with joy. But constant donations alone is not found among the group. So which assertion should we rely on? The name constant donation is not listed among those of the leaders of the bodhisattvas who sat in the assembly when the Lotus Sutra was preached. So it was perfectly natural that he should have spoken as he did. What is more, the sutra on resolving doubts about the middle day of the law does go on to state, but seeing how living beings come into the world and then pass away, he preached the law in order to save people. Why cling only to the statement that the Buddha did not preach one phrase of the law and overlook the fact that in actuality he preached a wonderful truth? Every one of the disciples you have described represents an erroneous view of the grossest kind. You should abandon these mistaken beliefs and instead put your faith in the Lotus Sutra. If you fail to do so, it means you lack any true aspiration for enlightenment, does it not? And that was his refutation of Zen based on how many times did he mention Nam Myoho Renge Kyo in that Go Show? Not once. Okay? And his refutation of all the other schools occurred before his enlightenment to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, bro. So he already knew they were all mistaken before he started preaching even in the first place. And that's why he started preaching, because he knew he had to. It was the time. It was the fifth 500-year period. It is what the Lotus Sutra said would happen. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll go on to the next Gosho in Volume 2.